Grange Hall in Millbrook Falls smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and every folding chair in the room was full. Clara Whitfield stood near the back, arms crossed over her flour-dusted apron, because she'd come straight from the bakery and hadn't had time to change. She wasn't expecting to be part of anything tonight. She was only here because everyone in town came to the Harvest Festival committee meeting, the way everyone came to church on Sunday, whether they had a reason or not. At the front of the room, Sam Cole stood beside the festival board, turning his cap over in his hands the way he did when he was nervous. Clara had known Sam for 11 years, ever since she and her husband Daniel had moved to town, and she had never once seen Sam Cole nervous. "Every year," said Mrs. Pruitt, the committee chair, tapping her clipboard, "the Cole Orchard picks a bakery to pair with for the festival's centerpiece booth. Apples and pie. It's tradition. So Sam, who's it going to be this year?" Vivian Hart was already smiling. She sat in the front row in a cream-colored coat, her bakery's name stitched onto the lapel pin she wore to every town event. Hart's Sweet Shop had catered the mayor's daughter's wedding. Hart's Sweet Shop had a line out the door every Saturday morning. Everyone in the room, including Clara, assumed they already knew the answer. Sam cleared his throat. "Clara Whitfield," he said. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the room made a sound like a held breath being let out all at once. Not quite a gasp, not quite a murmur, but something in between. The sound of 40 people recalculating something at the same time. Clara felt her face go hot. She looked around, certain someone else in the room must share her name, but there was no one. Just her, standing at the back in her flour-dusted apron, while Vivian Hart's smile cracked down the middle like a dropped plate. "There must be some mistake," Vivian said too brightly. "No mistake," Sam said. He wasn't looking at Vivian. He was looking at Clara, the way a man looks at something he's already decided on and doesn't intend to be talked out of. Clara didn't stay for the rest of the meeting. She walked home in the cold October dark with her arms wrapped around herself, and she did not feel chosen. She felt exposed, the way you feel when the wrong light hits you and shows everyone exactly how tired you are. Or she found him the next morning, out past the last row of Honeycrisps, loading crates onto a flatbed. "You chose the wrong woman," Clara said, before she'd even decided to say anything at all. Sam set the crate down slowly. "Good morning to you too, Clara. I mean it, Sam. Vivian's shop does 4 times my business. She's got the ovens for it, the staff for it. I've got one oven that groans every time I turn it on, and half my morning customers asking if I'm going to make it through winter." She hadn't meant to say that last part. It came out before she could stop it, the way true things sometimes do. Sam didn't argue with any of it. He just looked at her, steady, the way he looked at a tree before he decided whether it needed pruning. "I didn't pick Hart's Sweet Shop," he said, "because I don't want the best-selling pie at the festival. I want the best pie." "That's not." Clara stopped. "People are going to say you did it out of pity. People say a lot of things." He picked the crate back up. "Doesn't make them true." She wanted to argue further, but there was nothing to argue with. He hadn't given her an opening. He'd just gone back to loading apples, like the conversation was finished, like he hadn't upended her whole week in one sentence at a town meeting. She walked back toward her truck, and it was only halfway down the drive that she noticed the split-rail fence along the orchard road had been repaired, the one that had been leaning for 2 years, ever since a windstorm knocked it sideways. She hadn't asked anyone to fix it. She didn't own that stretch of road, but it ran past her bakery's delivery route, and she'd complained about it once, months ago, to no one in particular. She didn't think anything of it. Not yet. The oven groaned again on Thursday, and this time it didn't recover. Clara stood in the dark kitchen at 4 in the morning, with a cold oven and a full order book, and for the first time since Daniel died, she let herself cry over something as small as a broken appliance, because it was easier than crying over the actual size of the hole he'd left. By Friday, a repairman she hadn't called showed up at her back door. "Paid in full," he said, checking his clipboard. "Anonymous. Anonymous doesn't pay bills," Clara said. "Who sent you?" The man shrugged, already halfway to his truck. "Just doing the job, ma'am." She had her suspicions. She didn't voice them. Over the following weeks, small things kept happening. A cord of firewood appeared on her back porch the night before the first hard frost. Her delivery van, which had been sitting with a slow leak in the rear tire for a month, suddenly held air just fine. Josie Cole, Sam's 9-year-old daughter, started showing up after school some afternoons, sitting on the stool by the register with her homework spread out. Because, she said, her dad was still out in the orchard and it was warmer in the bakery. Clara liked having her there. Josie was quiet in the particular way of a child who'd lost a parent too. She noticed things. She noticed when Clara's smile didn't reach her eyes. She noticed the photograph of Daniel that Clara kept behind the register, and one day she asked, without any of the awkwardness adults brought to the subject, "Do you still talk to him?" "Sometimes," Clara admitted, "when the ovens are being difficult." Josie nodded like that made perfect sense. "I talk to my mom when the trees don't want to grow right." It was the first time in 2 years that grief had felt, for a moment, like something ordinary, like weather, like something you could mention out loud without the whole room going quiet. They began meeting twice a week to plan the festival booth. Apple and cinnamon hand pies, a recipe Clara had been tinkering with since September. Sam brought the apples. Clara brought everything else. Josie brought opinions, mostly about how much cinnamon was the correct amount, which was, according to her, always more. Working beside Sam was different than Clara expected. He didn't fill silence just to fill it. He'd stand at the counter rolling out dough with hands that looked like they belonged to someone who built things, not someone who baked. And he'd ask her questions that had nothing to do with pie. "You still make the coffee dark the way Daniel used to?" One evening, apropos of nothing, while Josie napped on the flour sack cushions in the corner, Clara stopped, cup halfway to her mouth. "How do you know how Daniel took his coffee?" Something crossed Sam's face, there and gone like a cloud passing over a field. "We had coffee together most Tuesdays, before the orchard opened for the day. Went on for years. I didn't know that. No reason you would." He went back to the dough. "Man's allowed a friend his wife doesn't know every detail about." It should have been an unremarkable thing to say, but something in the careful way he said it, like he was choosing each word before he let it out, made Clara look at him a little longer than she meant to. That night after Josie and Sam had gone home, Clara stood at her counter and did what she always did when something in her chest felt too big to carry alone. She talked to Daniel's photograph. "He never mentioned Tuesday," she said quietly. "What else didn't you tell me?" The photograph, as photographs do, said nothing at all. Vivian Hart was not by nature a cruel woman, but she was a proud one, and pride wounded is rarely quiet about it. By the second week of November, the story moving through Millbrook Falls had changed shape 3 or 4 times, the way stories do when they pass through enough mouths. What started as Sam Cole picked the widow for the festival booth had become, somewhere between the hardware store and the post office, poor Sam, roped into carrying that whole bakery on his back because he feels sorry for her, and, in its ugliest version, whispered once at the diner counter and repeated exactly once more before Clara heard it secondhand from her own assistant. "She's after his orchard money," same as she ran through her husband's. Clara had never run through anything. Daniel's life insurance had covered exactly the funeral and nothing more. The debt on the bakery equipment was hers alone, taken out the year before he died, when they'd both believed they had another 20 years to pay it off together. She didn't cry when she heard the rumor. She was long past the age of crying over gossip. But she did stop showing up to the Tuesday planning sessions. And when Sam knocked on her back door 2 days running and got no answer, he understood well enough what had happened. Josie was the one who finally got through. She showed up alone after school, climbed onto her usual stool, and said, without looking up from her homework, "My dad didn't fix your fence because he felt sorry for you." Clara went still. "I never said he fixed my fence. You didn't have to." Josie turned a page. "He fixes things for people he likes. He fixed our porch rail 3 times before he ever asked my mom to marry him. Old Walt at the orchard told me that." Clara sat down slowly across from her. "Josie, sweetheart, why are you telling me this?" The girl looked up, and for a moment she looked much older than 9. "Because grown-ups get scared and call it something else. My dad's doing it. You're doing it too." Clara went to the orchard that evening. not because she'd forgiven anything, but because a 9-year-old had said something true enough that it wouldn't let her sleep. She found Sam in the equipment shed, oiling the same fence tools he must have used to fix her road. He looked up when she came in, and something in his face said he'd been waiting for this conversation longer than she knew. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said. "All of it, starting with why you really picked me for that booth." Sam set the oil can down. For a long moment he didn't speak, and Clara had the strange sense of watching a man decide, finally, to put down something heavy he'd been carrying alone. "2 years ago," he said, "about 6 weeks before he passed, Daniel came out here on a Tuesday, same as always. Except that Tuesday he wasn't drinking his coffee, just holding the cup." Sam's voice had gone rough at the edges. "He told me his heart doctor found something. Told me not to tell you yet because he didn't want you looking at him like he was already gone. Wanted a little more time being just her husband, not her patient." Clara's hand found the workbench behind her. "He asked me one thing," Sam went on. "Said, if anything happened to him, he didn't want you finding out how hard the bakery money really was on your own. Didn't want you proud and stubborn and drowning quiet, which, no offense, is exactly what you'd have done." "The oven," Clara whispered. "The firewood. The van. Started as a promise to a friend." Sam's jaw tightened. "I want to be honest with you because you deserve that more than you deserve my comfort. It didn't stay just a promise. Somewhere in the last 2 years, it turned into something I wasn't looking for and didn't think I had any right to. And when the festival committee asked who I was pairing with, I picked you because your pie is the best in this county. That part's true. But I also picked you because I have been finding reasons to stand near you for a year, and I ran out of the will to pretend otherwise." Clara didn't say anything for a long time. The shed was quiet except for the wind moving through the trees outside, apples still hanging heavy on a few late branches. "You let me think I was managing on my own," she finally said. "Every time I felt proud of myself for making it through a hard month, that wasn't me. That was you, cleaning up behind me like I was a child who couldn't be trusted with her own life. That's not—" "And Daniel," her voice cracked on his name. "He knew. He knew. And he spent his last 6 weeks laughing at my jokes and fixing the porch step, and never once told me I should be saying goodbye properly. He wanted you to have him, not his diagnosis," Sam said quietly. "I've turned that over more nights than you know, whether it was right or wrong to keep that promise. I still don't have a clean answer." "I need to think," Clara said, and she left before he could say anything else, walking fast down the orchard road past the fence he'd mended for her without asking, feeling for the first time in 2 years that even her grief hadn't fully belonged to her. She didn't come to the bakery the next morning. She didn't answer when Sam knocked. For 4 days, Millbrook Falls held its breath the way small towns do when they can sense something has shifted, but nobody's saying what. The break came on a Wednesday with rain coming down sideways and the temperature dropping fast enough to turn the road slick. Clara was closing up when Josie appeared in the doorway, soaked through, breathing hard, no coat. "Dad's not answering the shed phone," Josie said. "Walt fell off the ladder fixing the loft door. Dad's trying to get him to the truck by himself, and I couldn't find anybody else, and I didn't know who else to run to." Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed her keys, wrapped Josie in her own coat, and drove them both out to the orchard through rain so heavy the wipers could barely keep up. They found Sam in the equipment shed, kneeling beside Walt, who was pale and gripping his arm at an angle that made Clara's stomach turn. "Truck," Clara said, already moving. "Now, I'll drive. You hold him steady." They got Walt to the county hospital in 11 minutes, a drive that should have taken 20. It was a clean break, nothing worse, and by the time the doctors had him settled, the fear had drained out of the room enough for everyone to remember to breathe. Sam found Clara in the hallway afterward, Josie asleep against her shoulder, still wrapped in Clara's coat. "You didn't have to come," he said. "Josie ran through the rain without a coat to find help," Clara said. "I wasn't going to make her regret who she ran to." Sam looked at his sleeping daughter, then at Clara, and something in his face broke open, gentle and unguarded in a way she hadn't seen since Daniel's funeral, when grief had made honest men out of people who usually hid behind manners. "I'm not asking you to forgive the secrets tonight," he said. "I just need you to know none of it. Not one thing I did was ever pity. A man doesn't fix another man's fence for 2 years out of pity. He does it because some part of him already knows what he wants and hasn't found the courage to say it." They talked properly 2 days later. Once Walt was resting at home with his arm in a sling and complaining loudly about being fussed over. Clara came to the orchard at dusk, when the light turned the whole hillside gold, and found Sam sitting on the porch steps of the farmhouse, Josie's laughter drifting out from inside where she was doing homework at the kitchen table. "I've been angry at you for the wrong reason," Clara said, sitting down beside him. "I told myself I was angry because you kept secrets. But really, I was angry because it meant I had to admit I'd been alone longer than I wanted to know, and somebody had been quietly making sure I didn't have to be." "You were never as alone as you felt," Sam said. "That doesn't mean the fear wasn't real." "What are you afraid of?" she asked. "You never said." He was quiet a moment, turning his cap over in his hands the way he had that first night at the Grange Hall. "Ellie asked me something near the end," he said. "Made me promise I wouldn't let losing her turn into a life where I never let anyone close again. Said Josie deserved a father who still believed in things, not just one who kept the orchard running out of habit." He exhaled slowly. "I've spent 4 years telling myself I was honoring her by being careful. Truth is, I was just scared, and I called it careful because that sounded better." "And Daniel's promise started as loyalty to a friend," Sam said. "Turned into something I didn't ask for and didn't know how to say out loud without it, sounding like I was trying to collect on a dead man's debt to justify wanting his wife." He looked at her then, steady. "I'm not trying to collect on anything, Clara. I just didn't want to keep hiding behind a promise when the truth is simpler than that. I care about you. Not because Daniel asked me to look after you, because of who you are when nobody's asked you to be anything." Clara didn't answer right away, but she didn't move away from him either, and in the gold light of that October evening, that felt like its own kind of answer. Vivian Hart came to the bakery the following week, and Clara braced herself for another round of the rumor mill in person. Instead, Vivian set a small paper bag on the counter. "Lemon scones," she said, "from my kitchen, a peace offering if you'll take it." Clara raised an eyebrow. "I heard some of what you were saying about me around town." "You did," Vivian agreed, not bothering to deny it. "I'm not proud of it. I was embarrassed, and embarrassment makes people small before it makes them honest." She folded her hands on the counter. "Sam picked you because your pie is better than mine, and because he's cared about you longer than either of us probably realized. I've known that man since we were 16. I should have seen it coming instead of pretending it was an insult." "That's more grace than I expected," Clara said. "I'm not made entirely of pride," Vivian said, with a small, wry smile. "Mostly. Not entirely." They didn't become close friends that afternoon, but something mended the small, ordinary way most things in a town like Millbrook Falls eventually did. Not with a grand gesture, but with scones and an honest sentence, which was, Clara thought, its own kind of quiet heroism. The night before the festival, Clara stood in her kitchen at midnight, surrounded by cooling racks of hand pies, and found she wasn't tired at all. She looked at Daniel's photograph the way she always did when the day had been too full to hold alone. "I think I'm supposed to be angry at you a little longer," she told it, "for not telling me, for deciding what I could carry without asking me first." She wiped a smear of flour from the picture frame. "But you were trying to protect the only thing you had left to give me, which was time that felt normal. I understand that better than I did a month ago." She paused, and for the first time since he'd died, she let herself say the thing she'd been most afraid to say out loud. "I think you'd like him, Daniel. I think that's part of why this is so hard. Because you'd have liked him, and some stubborn part of me has been afraid that loving him means loving you a little less. But Josie told me something true. Grown-ups get scared and call it something else." She smiled, unsteady but real. "I'm done calling it something else." Millbrook Falls Harvest Festival opened under a sky so blue it looked painted on. The whole town turned out in flannel and scarves, the smell of wood smoke and cider drifting between the booths. The Cole Orchard and Whitfield Bakery booth sat at the center of the green, exactly where the best-selling booth always stood. And by 10 in the morning, the line for apple cinnamon hand pies stretched past the pumpkin stand and around the corner of the band shell. Clara worked the counter with flour on her hands and Josie beside her, proudly announcing to every customer that she'd personally approved the cinnamon amount. Sam worked the crates, carrying more apples than the booth strictly needed, finding excuses to pass close by the counter every few minutes. Near noon, Mrs. Pruitt climbed the small stage to make the festival's traditional announcement. The crowd's favorite booth, voted by ballot, would be named before the pie-eating contest began. By a wide margin, Mrs. Pruitt announced, this year's favorite, Cole Orchard and Whitfield Bakery. The crowd cheered. Clara felt her face go warm, the same way it had the night of the committee meeting, except this time the warmth didn't feel like exposure. It felt like being seen, plainly, and finding out that being seen wasn't the danger she'd always assumed. Sam came around the counter as the applause settled, and in front of the whole gathered town. The same town that had gasped a month earlier, the same Mrs. Pruitt, the same Vivian Hart standing near the front with an honest smile this time instead of a cracked one. He held out his hand. I chose the right woman, he said. I just didn't get to say it properly the first time. Clara looked at his hand for a long moment. She thought about Daniel and the 6 weeks he'd spent loving her without letting fear take over the time they had left. She thought about Ellie, asking a grieving husband not to let his heart close permanently. She thought about a 9-year-old girl who'd understood, before either adult would admit it, exactly what fear dressed up as caution looked like. She took his hand. You held the pie booth together for a month, she said. Before you ever fixed my fence, I should have known you were the patient sort. 11 years, actually, Sam said. Since the first Tuesday, your husband told me you made the best coffee in the county and dared me to prove him wrong. And did you? Never once, Sam said. But I kept coming back for it anyway. Josie whooped from behind the counter loud enough that half the festival turned to look and didn't seem the least bit embarrassed about it. The following spring, by the time the orchard's blossoms opened the next spring, Whitfield's Bakery had a new sign out front, hand-lettered, unpretentious, reading Whitfield and Cole, and a second oven that never groaned, because Sam had insisted on installing it himself, the way he insisted on fixing most things that mattered to the people he loved. Josie had taken to spending most afternoons on her usual stool by the register, no longer waiting for her father to finish in the orchard, but simply because it was where she wanted to be. Clara still talked to Daniel's photograph sometimes, when the ovens gave her trouble, or when the light came through the bakery windows in a particular gold way that reminded her of an October evening on a farmhouse porch. She didn't feel like she was betraying anything anymore. She'd come to understand that love, the real and lasting kind, didn't take anything away from what came before it. It simply made more room. And most mornings before the bakery opened, Sam still came by with a crate of the season's first apples, and still sat across the counter while she poured his coffee dark, the way he'd learned to take it from a friend who had loved them both enough to make sure neither one had to face the years ahead entirely alone. The end.